Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Hopefully this Thursday we're going to play session 3.5, second half of session 3 of Dark Age of Man. Um, but I wanted to talk about a procedure that's in this book, and it's an interesting procedure, and it also makes me think a lot about how we make decisions as game masters. And it offers a kind of a different way, not a unique way, but a novel way of making some decisions as a game master during play. So I thought it was kind of like worth looking at because it doesn't just apply to this game. It's used elsewhere, but it's used really well in this one. The basic idea is that well, let me back up. You know, as game masters, how do we get to play? What do we get to do? And very often, what we get to do is make stuff up. Make decisions, make adjudications. Sometimes we get to play, the part of non-player characters, which is one of my favorite things to do. But very often, a part of our fun is deciding what happens, making things up, all that kind of stuff. There's various different ways that we do that. There is the method that a lot of people use where they decide beforehand. Here's this basic, maybe I don't want to, my bias and preference will show up, but some kind of scripted, A to B linear sort of adventure, that sort of thing. And some people love to put an awful lot of their time into that preparation. However, there are others among us that enjoy kind of preparing the basic idea, but then improvising along the way. And how that improvisation takes place can take many different forms. One of the ways that I'm rather fond of is that the world is a living, breathing place. I kind of know what's going on here, there, what the various groups or what have you of non-player characters in the world are doing. What would they do if they were not interrupted by the player characters? What are they just doing to each other? And, sometimes what they do ends up intersecting with what the player characters do. If there's a war that starts, two countries over, eventually, this was going to affect the player characters in some way. This other team of archaeologists, well, if you don't reach the tomb first, they're going to reach the tomb in 3 weeks because that's how long it's going to take them, etc. Maybe they're just on the way to the tomb, and maybe I've even rolled dice to see, well, how long does it actually take them to get there? But, there's already things that are kind of going on. There's another method of making decisions, which I can't remember the guy's name on Dragon's Foot, but he was very, very fond of this. The idea that I'm just going to make stuff up as we go along. And the players go in this direction, okay, well, I'm going to make some stuff up here. If they go in that direction, well, I'll make up stuff there. And I really don't have very much prepared at all. All right. Now, this is something that Ron Edwards called intuitive continuity. It might not be the best term, and I don't want to go down the whole rabbit hole of what that is exactly. But the idea that and a lot of us have done this as game masters. The players go in a particular direction, and we make up what seems to make sense. What would happen if they went here? What would happen if they went over to this area? I'm not really sure what's in this area. What probably would be in that area? What would happen if you get the idea? One of the critiques against this style of game mastering, and Ron brought this up in particular, is it's a little bit like, and maybe you get the reference, maybe you don't, Wallace and Gromit. Well, where Gromit is throwing down the train tracks as Wallace is driving the train. And even though the train's, ostensibly Wallace is driving this train, probably helplessly, Gromit's really putting down the tracks, and he's determining where things go. And in particular, the critique is not just that, in this case, well, the game master is just making things happen no matter what. It's like quantum ogres and all that kind of stuff. It's that even if the game master, like myself, has the best of intentions, we tend to make up stuff that we made up last time. We tend to make up stuff that we're familiar with. We tend to have certain patterns. There are certain tropes we tend to follow. There seems to be times, well, we should have a Raymond Chandler moment now, and guys should come, men with guns should come bursting through the door. All that sort of stuff. Enter a random seed chart. That's part of this book. Some people have said it's a little bit like a random table. Is it? Yes and no. It's a little bit different. The procedure is that at least the way I've been following the procedure is at the very beginning, we have stuff prepared, but I roll on this chart to see what exactly has just happened really recently. And the players are going to, this is going to impact the players. And this may affect how they make their decisions. Like, what do we do next? Once the characters have kind of dealt with maybe resolved, maybe not resolved, but certainly encountered the last result on this random table, well, then I roll again and I kind of find out, well, what's coming up next? Maybe it happens right away. Maybe it's just going to, it's what they're heading towards next. It really kind of depends on what you roll and what the characters are doing. It's a very player-directed game. These players can go just about anywhere they want to, which is the kind of game that I really prefer, is a very player-directed game where the players decide where they go, However, you roll dice and see what might happen or what's going to happen in that area. What are they going to cross in some way, shape, or form? This is kind of interesting. It's interesting because it makes you not make up the usual stuff that you might make up. It prevents you from making up some stuff that just maybe might make sense. Like this kind of, and it throws some interesting curveballs at you. Sometimes they make perfect sense. Sometimes it's absolute serendipity. When in their last adventure, actually playing this, there's a moment where they set up this illusion to convince merchants they should go left rather than right, to go to the right town rather than the wrong town. As soon as they do this, I roll on this table, and merchants show up. I'm like, I can't believe this. Now, this is something I might have, by fiat, just decided, okay, well, this is really nifty. See, it's working. Or I might have decided later on, that it didn't happen, or something else neat happened, or whatever. And they didn't see it. It just so happened that I rolled that result, and they saw it. Pretty interesting. Is it like a quantum ogre? Meaning that, it doesn't really matter if the players go left or players go right. This next thing that you roll on this random chart, that's what's going to happen, right? Yes, it's like a quantum ogre. And no, it's not like a quantum ogre. And what do I mean by that? Yeah, it's absolutely, no matter which direction they go, although there's various other things that can happen and they can interact with. The world is not reduced to what happens on this random chart. That's just part of what happens. Regardless of what, which way they go, I roll a prisoner is executed. They're going to encounter that no matter where they go. However, it's not always the same ogre. As we found out in that session, as Aloy had cast this spell and summoned the Fae and done all this kind of stuff, well, that's when I roll a prisoner is executed. Roll that right before that, actually. And so I'm kind of forced to what do I do with this? And I actually had the Fae execute one of their own prisoners. And, the characters discover this and hilarity ensues. Now, had I rolled that and they had been in the town, well, Lord Washburn had a prisoner, and that would have made a lot of sense. He kills this guy because nobody likes him anyway, because he's kind of a jerk from the session before that. If they were around Voudemad Mort, well, Voudemad Mort, he executes prisoners all the time. You probably find the guy hanging, by his feet or something like that, eviscerated. Yeah. But you get the idea. Or they could have been someplace else. They could have been going north with a merchant train, and maybe they encounter somebody. You get the idea. So. Yeah, they're going to encounter the ogre. They're going to encounter the prisoners executed or whatever else you roll on this random seed chart. However, context is everything. And, it's one of those things that I like. I like a system like this because, it allows me to be creative, but it gives me, it throws this random thing in there. Now I have to work with this. The random seed charts, they've been around forever. I mean, they're great. Francois Letarte talks about, and I forget which one it is. We've talked about it a couple times, but I'm sure there's a million games that do this, where you roll on a few different dice, and it gives you 3 different words, and that gives you, okay, well, here's what's happening, and then you make something up based on those 3 words. Here, it's a little bit different because you're rolling this throughout the game. Every time you've kind of, at least encounter resolved or something else, you roll the next thing on there. It's not exactly like a random encounter chart. It's not a bunch of monsters unless you want it to be, because you can put very open-ended things on this chart, which is one of the ways it works best. But I like that, and it's once again, it's another way as a game master to make decisions, but to give you a different prompt. You're not just acting on your own. You're not just coming up with the same predictable things because we're humans. That's what we end up doing. It gives you a nifty little extra, okay, well, I've got to work this in. How am I going to do that? Which I find to be pretty compelling because, once again, as a game master, that gives me something fun to work with. How am I going to play this game? I'm not playing a character. But here, this gives me something, well, okay, I have to use this now and insert this into reality. It's not the only way to run games. It's not the best way to run games. And I very much like the way where I kind of, there's the world's in motion, and then what do you think is going to happen if you go here? All that sort of stuff. However, this is really kind of neat as well. And yeah, do I like the method of just making stuff up as we go along? Sure. Yeah, I've done that a lot. But this helps you kind of, prompts you in a different way. And because at the end of the day, as game masters, we get to have fun playing the world. There's various different ways that we can make the decisions that we make when we do that.